Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Frogs Insider Podcast, brought to you proudly by the Dave Campbell's Texas Football and the Republic of Football Podcast Network. I am Melissa Treebwasser, and sitting across from me is not Jamie Plunkett. And the fact that I'm teeing up this intro means Jamie is not here. If we can't have Jamie, we've got, I think both of us would say better than either of us to co-host today, Marshall Newhouse, TCU legend, former professional football player, god of the O-line, both in playing and talking about it, co-host of the Just Win podcast, Raiders podcast you can hear twice a week, and of course, host on Big 12 Radio and the TuneIn Network. Marshall, I don't know if you know this, I don't know if Jamie told this, but our most downloaded episode last year was after TCU lost to Houston and you joined Jamie. I don't know if it's because fans wanted some answers or if it was just your pure presence, but coming after a win, we're going to see how much weight you really carry with the Frogs Insider audience.
I know. I've always been known for my aura, so maybe that's tribute to the downloads. But I imagine people wanted answers then, and even after a win, they probably want some questions answered today. So let's get into it.
Yeah, obviously coming off a win, that we are recording this Sunday morning after TCU beat SMU yesterday in what is ostensibly the final battle of the Iron Skillet, as far as we're aware. A big win for TCU, who finishes their preseason slate 3-0 with wins over two Power 4 opponents, two ACC opponents, two opponents that we probably have question marks about. But before we start caveating victories, how important is it for this team to be 3-0 as we kind of get towards the end of September?
Listen, when the schedule comes out and you start seeing other teams getting put together, and Hoover's coming back, there's some questions, holes to fill. You start saying, all right, if they can get through this first kind of month and a half gauntlet, they have a real good chance to compete in what is their wide open Big 12. And so this was kind of, obviously the unknown of North Carolina, and then getting to this game, it being a rivalry and SMU coming off a playoff appearance. So huge implications. And so to beat a very talented team, very talented quarterback, Rashley has spouted off a lot. They've made a lot of noise about their recruiting, both from high school kids and portal. They've got their QB. He's super talented. And so this was going to be a tough test, especially for TCU, who kind of sneakily, quietly won 9 games last year. So people are like, all right, was that like a fluke after they started 3-3, or is this a team to be reckoned with? And so I think Saturday proved they are indeed a team to be reckoned with. A lot to improve upon, some things that literally you can't do if you want to win at the highest level. And I think Sonny knows that. I think the guys know that. But some legitimate holes and questions, both on offense and defense. But ultimately, to have all those questions, to have those potential holes, and to beat SMU in that way is a huge positive sign. So just a really constructive day. I think they're going to be in the film room this week, getting ready for Arizona State with some confidence and knowing, hey, there's a lot we can improve on. That game shouldn't have been as close as it was to be, if we're being really honest. We can talk about some blown ref calls. We can talk about some boneheaded TCU plays. So all that wrapped up to say, really positive so far out of the gate. Another big one coming up. So you just got to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it, but TCU is 9-1 in their last 10 games, with their only loss being a walk-off field goal on the road in Waco. With a lot of the same pieces, they lost some skill position players, some of whom you're covering twice a week with your Raiders podcast, but they seem to have kind of not missed a beat on offense. And Josh Hoover's evolution in those last 10 games, I think, has been something really special to watch. When you watched Hoover yesterday, he missed on a lot of throws. He seemed maybe a little bit juiced, a little bit amped up. But at the end of the day, he's looking at 370-something yards, 5 touchdowns. And in the fourth quarter, at a time when things were tight, he willed his team down the field. He got some help, some pretty big plays from Eric McAllister. But as somebody who works so closely with the quarterback position, what do you see in Hoover and how he's elevated his play and how he's elevating TCU as a whole on that side of the ball?
Yeah, it's just such a luxury to have an experienced signal caller, an overall accurate guy. He was only about 55% completion rate on Saturday, but overall an accurate guy, really even keeled. It's very interesting that Sonny is relatively even keeled and their quarterback is relatively even keeled. So even when moments sway in the game, it doesn't feel like this team really kind of tucks inward or gets too big chested, and I think that's directly correlated to the way Hoover carries himself. And just some of the balls are really impressive. Obviously, it's nice to have playmakers. And you mentioned losing Jack Bech and Savion and a couple other, skill guys, and replacing them out of the transfer portal, Eric Kessler, who's on the roster, and then Jordan Dwyer right away, is, credit to the recruiting staff, credit to Sonny Dykes. And so you've got weapons. He's taking advantage of the weapons. He is still, to me, a couple, 2-3 times a game putting the ball in harm's way. And that was a small problem last year, where it just felt like he has these blackout moments where he's like, F it, I'm forcing it in. And you want that a little bit in a quarterback, but you don't want full-on gunslinger where unnecessarily you're taking a risk. And there were a couple throws yesterday where you're like, man, why even throw that? It's either throw it away or put it where the receiver can get it or nobody type throws. And then I get he wants you got a size matchup one-on-one with Eric Kessler. So some of the fades we don't love, but that's built into this offense, this Kendall Briles offense. And so we understand it. Honestly, the 50-50 balls, our guy versus their guy, you're okay with the odds, even if you don't love the play. But then he gets hit on the deep ball that McAllister adjusts to later in the game and makes a beautiful play. So that's just a teammate bailing out another teammate. And we'll talk about the protection breakdown in that moment. But overall, it's such a luxury. I mean, he's a guy who you go into a game with just the utmost confidence in, especially in this league. He's after the North Carolina game. It's funny. Literally no one was saying Josh Hoover's name. And then a few people after the game were like, oh, man, this kid's pretty good. And then now I just don't think he is as a guy you can doubt. But I think he's still going to get a lot of doubt just because people will have this really reservation about talking about TCU, whatever that might be. I'm honestly okay with it. The less that people are talking about TCU, less them just go about their business. They will eventually be rewarded for winning football games and doing what they're supposed to do. I don't get up in arms about not being, ranked where we want to be ranked and all that stuff. But again, Josh Hoover, putting himself in position, making mostly good decisions, putting the ball where guys need to be. And then this year, we shouted about it last year, using his feet intentionally to keep teams and defenses honest. And it never, to me, was never about turning into Cam Newton and all these design QB runs and all that stuff. That's not him. You're going to run around and just get your head popped off. But scrambling, extending plays, he was such a statue. You could tell he was processing, trying to stay in the pocket last year. And now he's like, all right, I don't have to straight up scramble, but I'm going to extend the play, extend the pocket, throw on the run, let my receivers detach from the plaster coverage and make plays downfield. That first touchdown there, McAllister was a prime example of that. And then, some of these, there's a couple QB draws.
Yeah, QB draw on 4th and 4, right? Like, that was brilliant.
Intentionally and getting down. I literally said in the moment when he kind of dove head first for a first down, that's Andy Dalton, patented that slide where you don't get, punished for starting your normal feet first slide by where you start the slide. You also do kind of, if you do it well, protect yourself by just going head first, getting down, and then also you get those extra yard, which, sometimes makes a difference between a first down and a not a first down. So overall, lots to improve on. But again, going into each week, TCU is primed and should be in every single game because of Josh Hoover's play.
Yeah, I think that, we look back 53 weeks ago and TCU lost to UCF after having a big lead in the first half, a big lead about halfway through the third quarter. And Josh had an opportunity to lead the team down the field late in the fourth, and they weren't successful. They couldn't get it done. And you look at how he's evolved. While he still is that gunslinger to a degree, I mean, I can think of, there's 3 throws that stick up the top of my head that I was like, what are you doing, Josh? And there may have been more than that, but there's 3 I remember distinctly, including that absolute prayer that he got hit on, but still, never, that ball should have never been released. No. But when you look back to the first 6 games of last year, he's making so many fewer of those decisions, and it feels like that when he does push his luck, it's because he trusts his receiver, not because he's making a poor decision. And that balance, right? Like you mentioned that. You've got to have some of that. Like Jamie and I, during our Hot Takes show, talked about, someone said Hoover was going to complete 74, 76% of his passes. And I almost said, I don't know if I like that. I want my QB taking a few more chances, having a few more incompletions. And I think Hoover's done a really nice job of balancing that. And, Steven Johnson said it post-game, but if he was wearing just about any other jersey in the country, he's on the Heisman odds board. But because he plays for TCU, and because TCU hasn't had an opportunity in a showcase game against a ranked opponent to really prove something. They did have the showcase game on opening night, but everyone immediately just said UNC is terrible. And they're right, but it's going to be interesting to see if he can go on the road this Friday and will his team to win in a hostile environment against a team that's reeling a little bit, if that'll get people to start paying attention. The best thing about Josh is, though, he doesn't care either. He has your philosophy. He could care less who's talking about him. And I think that's why he's so easy to root for and why he's so cool, calm, and collected on the field. We'll talk about the receivers, but you touched on it, so I want to jump right into the protection. This offensive line looked like an absolute machine in game one against now what we know is a pretty weak UNC front. They struggled a little bit against ACU running the football. We saw Kavorian Barnes get banged up. He didn't play Saturday against SMU. The running game was successful when it needed to be, but wasn't necessarily, they were not really able to establish a dominance and an ability to do what they wanted to do running the football, but they made it work when they needed to. SMU has a ton of talented defensive players. Jeremy Clark talked about that defensive front and gave more credit to the SMU defense, and he said he was concerned about the TCU offensive line. But as an offensive lineman and somebody who understands his position on a level 99% of us never will, what are you seeing from that group? What is their strength, and are you concerned about the amount of times SMU was able to get to Josh and force him to use his legs and scramble around a little bit?
Yeah, I was talking to your coach, Jamie, during the game a little bit, and I had made a comment about how at that point in the game, I think it was like midway through the second quarter, we hadn't seen a lot of leakage in the run and pass game. And leakage means, guys filtering through on combo blocks or just, unnecessary pressure in pass protection. And to that point, I think it was true. And then, I, of course, jinxed the O-line and there was a play. But generally earlier in the game, you just saw more, I call it stickiness in the run game, stickiness in pass protection, where after the initial, collision between O lineman and D lineman, their hands are inside, they're moving their feet, and they're staying with the block. They're not having, in pass protection, we call it having a time clock in your head where, you want the quarterback to have the ball gone in 3 or 4 seconds, but sometimes that's just not the case. And as a lineman, you block as if he needs it for 10 seconds. You just don't even worry about it. And then in the run game, after the initial collision, running your feet, guys just finishing blocks. And I saw a lot of that. Even as the game went on, some of the, games or, guys losing one-on-one battles started happening. But a lot of them were coverage sacks. You saw Josh Hoover scanning downfield. The pocket was initially clean. And the pocket breaks down, but you look down and your imaginary clock stopped watching my head. And it's a 5-second, 6-second protection. So ultimately, you think that's a positive. But then, there are moments where SMU would run a game, a TE, which is a tackle end stunt, and it would cause guys a little problems. Ryan Hughes had a holding. And then, again, the false starts. That stuff is just like, you got to nip it out completely. I mentioned to people I was watching with so many second and third and long moments where in big games against good teams, better teams, that kills you. It just kills drives. And so I imagine Sonny's, in the film session, that's primary. I mean, TCU had too many penalties yesterday all around, but the false starts are in your control. You know the snap count. And now I didn't play in a system where they clapped. I had, a voice hard count. It's a whole different thing, but still, it's a discipline thing. It's a it's a rep thing. And so getting that sewed up for sure. I think ultimately the move for Colton Deary to center has been really positive. He seems to be really comfortable. I feel like they have a little of an edge. I want even more. I want more finish, but a lot of room to improve. And they're going to face some. I think last year SMU had a marquee pass rusher. This year didn't necessarily have a marquee pass rusher, but teams moving forward are going to have a stud in third and long, where both tackles or inside guard or center is going to have to really buck up. Hopefully you send some help his way. But guys are going to have to really put their feet in the ground and strain, just really like clamp down your hands inside, your whole core is braced, all that critical technical stuff of just like, I'm going to not lose. I can't lose this block. I don't care who it is. And so I think Kendall Bros will still try to call a balanced game where there's enough. I would like to see more screens personally. get guys out.
You might be the only TCU person that wants to see more screens.
Well, not even necessarily wide receiver screens. I'm talking about running back slow screens, because the entire college game is just littered with wide receiver screens. It's kind of nuts. But, just to change up the clock of pass rushers. And then, more downhill runs. I jumped out of my seat in the last drive before the inexplicable 4th and 15, which I actually will get to why that was explainable, as well as the other aggressiveness yesterday. But they got in basically a 3 tight end set under center, and they ran it's a toss, but it's like a linear toss where he tosses it directly back, and the running back is running a dive, and they're running right down your throat, and they converted. And I was like, whoa, where does this come from? I love that, because it's something you don't see anymore in college ranks, and it to me is an attitude run. Yeah. And I don't know if that was Sonny, an SMU specific run, or is that something we can expect? I loved it. To me, it just sets the tone. It's one of those things where it's us against them. And so, the offensive line has a lot of room to improve. I'd like to see more finish, like I say, more stickiness, a little bit more edge. But overall, I mean, you don't pass for 380 yards without some protection, and you don't run for 130 as a team without some holes there. So all in all, lots of room to improve, but they've been solid. There's been a lot less worries, shakiness, because guys I think are in better position. Ryan Hughes has really kind of become, I don't worry about him anymore. I think he's limited athletically so far. So if we see a stud, hopefully there's like a plan for the stud pass rusher. But again, I think a solid O-line performance so far, lots of stuff to improve.
Yeah, well, and I think, you kind of mentioned the run game. We'll talk a little bit about the performances there, but just the fact that TCU was able to run the ball 37 times and Josh threw it 40, you have balance in that game. Yep. You're only rushing for 3.7 yards a carry, but there's so much more confidence this year. Yeah. In a 3rd and 3. I'm 100% confident TCU can convert a 3rd and 3 on the ground. I did not believe that a season ago. Going forward on 4th and 4, using Josh to run, I knew as soon as they snapped the ball, you could see the middle of the field open up, and you're just like, okay, TCU has a plan to be able to run the ball effectively that doesn't require putting Savion Williams in the Wildcat. And when you get Barnes back, I think it's even better. And that's kind of going to be my next question, to segue from offensive line play to running back play. I think why Kevorian Barnes looked so effective in the first game and a half that he played is he understands as a veteran how to hit the hole and go. And I think what we saw that a little bit with Trent Battle, who, other than that just absolutely chaotic, completely reversal of the field run that reminded me of Kendre Miller, and Aaron Green back in, I think it was 2014 against Kansas State, where he, reversed course and went 70 yards. But some of the younger guys, Jeremy Payne did some really great things. I saw Nate Palmer do some really good things. John Denman did some really good things, but those guys are still a little unsure because they don't have the reps, right? So it doesn't seem like they hit the hole and go, whereas Barnes kind of hits the hole and goes. How much of that is run blocking, and how much of that is still young running backs getting used to playing at this level and being counted on to pick up positive yardage?
I think it's a lot of experience. And I even say Kevorian Barnes is such a great kid in the portal. It's kind of a mixture between Battle and Payne. And he's got a lot of elusiveness, quickness, but he's built, he's more like a fire hydrant built, can really run with power. I think Battle he's better downhill, and I think Payne is more of a scat back. He is light, and so he's not going to be running through a lot of arm tackles and running over a lot of guys. And so Kevorian Barnes is the best of both of those worlds, and we saw that game 1. But yeah, as long as, to me, initially, there's a stat, I don't know if they track it in college, but in NFL, it's yards before contact. And that directly correlates to how your linemen are getting to their assignments in the run game. And is there penetration? Is the line of scrimmage neutral, negative, or positive? Are they pushing forward where when the first time the running back gets touched, is it past your line of scrimmage? Does he have downhill momentum? Is he hitting the hole? And is he having a chance to make, get a one-on-one against a safety or a corner, make a guy miss, fall forward for 3, 4, 5 yards versus getting hit in the backfield all the time? And so I'm not seeing running backs getting hit in the backfield as much. And part of that was, I think, the offensive line. But I think, again, a guy like Kevorian Barnes understands where the ball is intending to hit, but also not dialing in and locking into that place and seeing where things are developing in the run blocking scheme, having patience, and then again downhill, hitting the hole. The worst thing you can look for is a guy dancing too much, trying to do too much, because sometimes getting that 2 yards and moving on is better than the sideways stuff, because teams are mostly too fast. We don't have, I believe, a guy on the roster who's a 4-4 guy in the running back room. So, like, lean into your strengths, and it'll be big to get him back. But again, this kind of by committee thing can still work, because ultimately it's about the intent. It's about keeping teams honest. It's about letting the play action be effective because there's a threat of a running game. So, we've got this kind of play action where Josh kind of pivots out and it's like a fake sweep. There's a lot of different variations on that. I don't think Kendall's even introduced, but I think he has in his playbook a lot of orbit motion with certain guys. And so there's a lot of stuff that they can build on. And so, again, getting this on film, having balance where teams have to respect the runs early and downs, is a big deal. And then to me, that'll transition to what I was talking about earlier, which was going into this game, TCU knew they were down their starting kicker. I never heard it mentioned on the broadcast, but that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Earlier in the game, I made a comment about they can't keep getting in second and long, third and long. That's still true. But I believe going into the game, the mindset was most third downs, especially in positive territory, which is on the other side of the 50, we're going to use third down as 2-down territory, which means the third down call doesn't have to get a first down per se, because we know we're going for it on fourth down. That to me was the plan all game. And you saw, we missed a kick later in the game, and it wasn't even close. And so to me, that is a testament to, I think the game plan was our offense, who we trust with Josh Hoover, with all these veteran guys. If it's third and manageable, and then again, fourth and manageable, we're going to be aggressive. I don't think that was a Sonny versus SMU thing. I don't think that was an Iron Skillet thing. I think that was the game plan because of the kicking game. And that leads me to the frustrating 4th and 15 down there at the end. I still think you kick the ball, but I understand now why maybe they didn't, because the kicking situation, after having just seen him push a field goal 10 yards to the right, you're like, all right, if he misses bad, they get this field position anyway, and we have no points to show for it. At least I trust Josh Hoover at this time more than our backup kicker. Now, I would love to have a backup kicker we're confident in, but that's a luxury. Not everyone has that. So maybe they develop that, and maybe get help me with the kicker's name, the starting kicker.
The starting kicker is Kyle Lemmerman. And McCashland is who has been kicking for TCU.
So hopefully we build McCashland's confidence up to get him to that place, and we get Lemmerman back. But again, that to me was an intentional strategy thing going into this game.
Absolutely. And I think that, even if Lemmerman had been on the field, we saw him be really effective against UNC. He had a rough camp. And I don't know that he's a guy that you're going to roll out there 45 yards and beyond with a ton of confidence, just because he hasn't been asked to do that a whole lot. And he's only a second-year player. And when he does return, he'll be coming off of injury. So I loved the philosophy of, like you said, when it was 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 12, which it was far too often yesterday, it still felt like they had 2 downs to make a first down as soon as they got within about 5 yards of midfield. TCU was 9 of 17 on 3rd down. They were 3 for 4 on 4th down. The only one they didn't convert was that final. And I didn't even have a problem with them going for it there, because at that point, I would have liked to seen a different play call. I wanted them to throw, but I think that's where you get back to those running back screens. Kind of the play that we saw Jeremy Payne score on, something like that. Just get the ball out and try to keep something inbounds and run some clock and let time tick away. Now, things could have gone very poorly if Josh Hoover had gotten injured on that. But thankfully, just cramps, and he's fine. And I told everybody at the meeting, I was like, it's cramps. Look at the way they're grabbing his ankle. Like, you don't grab an ankle like that if this man is injured. So that was a very scary moment in the stadium. But yeah, I mean, I think that when you have the luxury of having a quarterback you trust like Josh Hoover, be aggressive. Especially at home in front of what was a great crowd, over 6,000, almost 7,000 TCU students, biggest student crowd in school history. You've got to have confidence to be able to go for it when you're on the opponent side of the field. And the first 3 times they attempted it, they were successful. So clearly it was working.
Yeah, definitely. And so, that explains, I think, when people were kind of pulling their hair out, like, why? And I think ultimately it was the game plan thing. It was taking place over the course of the game. And 9 for 17 is really good on 3rd down. 3 for 4 is really good on 4th down. So you hope to not have to do that all season. But also, To me, I think it's kind of turned, the tides have turned from an analytics standpoint in the NFL. I think college is always
Sure.
more, but I think moving forward, you're like, all right, we have packages, we have, schemes that are primed to pick up fourth downs. And there'll be moments where, especially against good teams, we don't want to give them the ball back. This is absolute strategy. This is, you can call it game theory, whatever. We're trying to stay ahead of aggressive teams, especially with good quarterbacks like they're about to face with Sam Levitt moving on down the road in the Big 12. To me, that's something to have in your pocket where guys are have the mentality of like, oh, going forward on fourth down is no big deal. Like it's another that we have to execute. But the defense is ready. The offense is ready. They're prepared mentally to be an aggressive team. And so, that to me was something that was, for me, game plan specific, but can carry on throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I fully expect it to. And I do want to give Nate McCashland props. I mean, that's a really hard position to be in. Lemmerman, he's a kicker with a leg injury. Who knows? This could be long term. He could be back in a couple of weeks. But McCashland, I thought, did an excellent job on kickoffs. We've seen so many times historically, it feels like this is such a TCU issue after a big play, kicking the ball out of bounds or getting a penalty. And McCashland was nails with his kickoff attempts. He made his extra points. I think that needs to be the expectation. If we're 35 yards and in, I trust Nate McCashland to make that kick. And the 47-yarder that he missed came after what should have been an Eric McAllister touchdown. And was not, he was put in a very bad position. He also had to think about it for probably 6 minutes of real time because of the timeout and the review that wasn't a review and all of the chaos and people were throwing stuff on the field. So I don't hold that against him whatsoever. I think that his job is to kick off well and to make extra points. And we saw him do that very, very consistently. And so that's what we have to ask of him. But I think it does change the way you go into a game. And frankly, I'm here for it. I would rather be aggressive, and I TCU 4th and 6 and below, I'm pretty confident can pick that up more often than not. Let's touch on the wide receivers before we flip sides of the ball to the defense. Talked about that Eric McAllister. We've talked about that play a lot. It was asked a lot in the post-game press conference. I think that we will at some point get a letter of the ACC going, whoops, our bad, for the officiating crew, but nothing more than that. You watched this team very closely last year. There are 2 guys on NFL rosters. There's the 3rd guy in an NFL practice squad. That was an elite wide receiver unit. It looks like somehow they managed to not skip much of a beat with McAllister, Jordan Dwyer, who you've talked about, and then also Joseph Manjack, who had one of the most physical touchdowns I've seen from a TCU wide receiver in a long time. What have you seen from that group? And I also want to include the tight ends because I think DJ Rogers has been an unsung hero for this team with his blocking and his pass catching. But talking about blocking, I loved what Eric McAllister said post-game. He said, I blocked my ass off in game 1 so Jordan Dwyer could have a big game. I blocked my ass off in game 2 so that Manjack and Ed Small could have big games. Today was my day to be that big player. What makes him so unique, and where do you see him slotting in professionally? Because it looks like he reminded people he's an NFL caliber player.
For sure. I mean, and the first thing that pops off is the size. He's a big body guy, really fast, straight speed, but you saw on those slants enough quickness to threaten inside. But again, the big body to box guys out, and then the run after the catch stuff. I literally think those DBs didn't realize how big and strong he was. They were trying to strip. They weren't technically sound, but they just bounced off of him. And then he has enough speed to pull away from them, and that's just a rare combination. And so he'll be getting looks. He already is. And you put up, I don't care what system you're in, you put up 254 with potential that could have been 300. You put up 3 touchdowns, the potential could have been 5 touchdowns.
Should have been 5, yeah.
That jumps off the screen. And so, but again, his buy-in and him mentioning that was, listen, the bowl game, I called the New Mexico Bowl, the TCU. He was the star player. He was targeted, and that was great. And so you're going into the season, you're like, all right, he's going to be our new QJ, guys like him before, that number 1, the X, the star. First week out, North Carolina just wasn't going to let that happen. For whatever reason, he just wasn't open, wasn't getting the looks. And then Josh just found a little connection with Jordan Dwyer, which is good. And he acknowledged, hey, I'm blocking both in the run game, which we always say when receivers are aggressively blocking downfield, that's when run games go from normal to explosive, and that then helps you as a receiver. So his mentality and that mentality of the room, led by Malcolm Kelly, is a huge thing. He's such a blessing to have. He could have been a lot of places as a coordinator. I mean, he's just incredible. He loves TCU, And so I think that room loves him, and they block for each other. They know that with a guy like Hoover in any game, it could be my day. Dwyer first week, and then now McAllister. And so moving forward, teams are like, all right, now we've got 2 studs on the outside, and now we've got both a tight end and Joseph Manjack over the middle as safety valves that Josh really trusts. There's a couple of 3rd and 4th downs that Manjack ran kind of a shallow over, and it's man coverage. It's like, I got to put the ball where he can catch it, fall forward and get the first down, and he trusts him. And he's out there raw dogging it with no gloves, no tape, no nothing, and he's snatching the ball. And so you love to see it. And then the touchdown to Manjack as well, just the physical nature about him. It's just he's a throwback. There's not many receivers like him. And so just a huge get for TCU. And again, DJ Rogers, a tight end is not something you think of in a college offense, but Kendall Browse loves tight ends. He really does use them. Not necessarily tight ends like they had at Baylor that were former 400-pound offensive linemen, but tight ends nonetheless. And you saw even if, a couple 4th downs that were really unmanageable, DJ Rogers catches the ball, gets 10. That's not nothing, because in a game where, you might need to cut the distance half to get a field goal or, go for it again, those are huge catches. And he seems to have really sure hands, takes care of the ball after the catch. And so these are big weapons to have for a guy who is as savvy as Hoover is, can spread the ball around. So at any moment, any receiver can have a day. And we saw that with McAllister. The 50-50 balls, most of the time, it's just not a high percentage play, even though it's literally 50%. We say that. But I understand the read where they're going to leave him one-on-one backside, and Josh trusts his 6'4" receiver to go make a play. I would like to see McAllister high pointing these balls a little more, not letting it into his body, matching the physicality. I mentioned, not conspiratorially. These were ACC refs. He was getting hung on multiple times that should have been DPI. It was blatant. They're holding down his near side arm. That's defensive pass interference. But in the moment, when you feel that, you get a sense for how the game's being ref. You either you embellish a little bit, not to do the swapping thing, but you let it be known that you're being restricted, or you do the thing back and you dominate and you go up and get the ball. You have a height advantage. You have a matchup advantage. I don't mind the throws as much if there's a more of an aggressive mentality from Eric McAllister. But again, 2 catches that were, to me, sure touchdowns. One was a flub on a call, and one was just a really good aggressive play by the DB, but I want more aggression back because you got to fight back fire with fire. So those are incredible options to have. These are luxuries. These are, guys that want the ball. You can still they want it, but they also doesn't seem like they're going to cause a scene. They know that the next week could be mine, or the next half, the next quarter could be mine. So really positive so far from the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Malcolm Kelly there, because when you look at the way this room has behaved going back, years and years, truly, for as long as Malcolm has been here, the culture that he's developed with the receiving group. We saw complete, total unselfishness from this unit a season ago, and we're seeing it again this year. And, you mentioned the McAllister touchdown where the DB ripped the ball away from him. What I loved is that instead of being pouting and hanging his head and doing whatever else, he came back and said, I have to be better. And he said that in the postgame as well, and said, I need to make a play. And so when he had the opportunity to kind of quote unquote make up for that, we saw him deliver, with 2 massive touchdowns to put this game away and give TCU an opportunity to take the Skillet home. That's not what wide receivers are known for necessarily, right? Like, it's a diva position for a reason. And I was just very impressed with the maturity that Eric has shown throughout the season, going back to game 1 and run blocking on a 75-yard run and springing guys loose. And even when he wasn't getting the targets, and on a day where he got 15 targets, and dealt with a lot of physicality, he responded when he needed to instead of putting his head down. And I thought that says a lot about him. It says a lot about that group of young men and what Malcolm Kelly and Corey Coleman and all of them have built in that space. It's great to see. Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball as well. TCU was without Zach Chapman on the edge. They were down a pass rusher. Had a lot of issues getting home on the defensive line in the first half, but did a really good job overall. I think just making Kevin Jennings work a little bit more than he wanted to. They did a great job also, I think, in the run defense. This was one of SMU's least effective offensive games of the season. They only ran for 3.5 yards to carry on 27 attempts. So while it wasn't dominant until late and they got home when they needed to in the fourth quarter, I think the defense did a pretty good job of containing SMU and preventing too many of those explosive plays and putting TCU's offense in a position to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, judging by the production early on in the game, this doesn't feel like a front four, front seven that's going to get a lot of pressure consistently early. But what they do play is really sound football. And that's all they need to do, especially on these early rundowns. Because what you saw was in this Andy Avalos defense, when guys get second and long, third and long, he has got a lot of things to dial up, a lot of simulated pressures, mud linebackers, people dropping into coverage, all kind of things. And even for a quarterback like Kevin Jennings, who was making some incredible plays, crossbody throws, extending plays, he was put under pressure a lot. And so I think it's just a matter of being who we are. Obviously, you want Chapman back for a little bit more juice off the edge, early and downs, deal. I think he is what he is at this point. He's a big body. I love to continue to see him play more physical and aggressive with his hands. He's long. He's got long limbs. I want to see him lock guys out and throw them around a little bit more. But again, being stout in the run game early, being sound, and letting your coverage and letting the defense coordinator get you in a position to make aggressive plays on third and long, second and long, I think is where this defense is going to make its hay. Last year, you could just tell they were all a step slow. They were thinking. This was I don't know how complicated in the grand scheme of all defenses, but it's a new defense. It's a multiple defense, a lot of new positions, a lot of new asks and techniques. And so last year, I called the Houston game. Houston was as limited offense as you could get last year. Had a quarterback who could barely throw it out. All he could throw was an out or a slant, and then QB draws that went for huge gains. And you're like, okay, those are day one things that the defense, I could tell, was just thinking. They weren't really anticipating the asks and the needs of their coordinator. This season so far, it looks very much like the communication's on point. You can see when signals come in, when teams go in motion, they're communicating left to right, back to front. That helps to have a guy like Bud Clark in the back end, Jamel Johnson on the back end. And so again, second year in defense, guys are just playing faster. I don't think a whole lot is different. They're just playing faster and they're in position because you don't have to do a ton that's flashy if you have the athletes, and TCU definitely has the athletes. Against a team like SMU, who has a lot of explosion, you saw in moments TCU looked like the better team just because they were in position. Kevin Jennings was forced to make really accurate throws, which he made some of. Good quarterbacks are going to make those throws. And then minus the scrambles and just the otherworldly plays, he was pretty pedestrian. And so, that's all you can ask for. The offense is going to put pressure on opposing offenses, and the defense doesn't have to do anything amazing. And you saw at the end there, when a quarterback is in a do or die pass situation, this defense comes to life. They are a nightmare to have to protect against when it's an obvious passing down. So doing everything you can to get to that spot, I think this defense will continue to shine. Lots of holes. I think, again, run fills, runs like edge setting has been a big thing. Keeping contained in the pass protection for mobile quarterbacks will continue to be an emphasis. But I saw a lot to like. The coverage grades, were pretty good for the most part. I think some plays that were if the DB, whether it's Bud Clark or Jamel Johnson, just tries not to make the Superman play and makes the average play, PBU, we're looking at, second and long, third and long. And so those type of things, those kind of normal everyday things, continue to do those and do them well.
Yeah, I think when you look at the run defense a year ago, especially at the beginning of the season versus the run defense today, there's a lot more gap integrity. They're doing their job. They're filling their spots. Now, they're not getting to the quarterback with 4 very often. We saw SMU get to the quarterback with 4 pretty consistently on Saturday, but they're not giving up the big plays. They're not losing their assignment. They're not failing in their job and requiring the other 10 guys to have to step up, I think, for the most part. So while it's not going to be the most dominant defense, if it can be a technically sound defense, they're athletic enough and they're smart enough and the scheme is good enough for them to make a lot of plays and propel TCU to some victories, especially if you just give this offense a chance. They're going to be pretty good. They're going to be able to score against a lot of really good defenses too. So it does kind of feel like that bend but don't break philosophy was pretty effective. And then in the second half, especially, you got some really big plays and had some big moments in order to put TCU's offense at a chance to get back on the field. I do want to ask you about one of the negative things of the defense. There was that TCU comes out and they go 3 and out and they get the ball back, and it looks like the defense responds and forces the 3 and out until there's an unsportsmanlike penalty that Max Carroll commits on 3rd down and long. I don't want to ask you about penalty. I think that's been done ad nauseum. This is a player that just needs to learn. It's an emotional moment. I'm willing to forgive that because TCU won. But I want to talk to you about how Caleb Elarms-Orr responded. I don't know if you saw, but he got right after him. What does that type of leadership in that moment for a young player that's being asked to play a big role to receive that? How does that kind of work on the football field?
Listen, I love that. I was, in the moment we were all just really pissed about the boneheaded play. That is what it is. You literally inexcusable after, especially making a really good hit, a really good tackle. You just messed up the drive in your own play. But yeah, you saw Caleb Elarms-Orr get in his face, and to me, based on Malcolm's reaction, there's a respect there. There's an understanding. Oh, I screwed up. Oh, he's right. Oh, I trust him. He's not doing this to belittle me. He's not doing this from an unearned position. So ultimately on teams, on offense units, defensive units, you want that accountability. The best teams I ever was on, college and pro, were kind of self-policed. And that to me is a version of self-policing that is earned. It's earned in the offseason when none of us are around. It's earned in the weight room, holding guys accountable. Certain leaders, whether they're vocal or just by example, kind of rising to the top and people following their lead and trusting their judgment, trusting their feedback. And to me, that was a moment where it could have been something that, we were all pissed about, but then no one brought up, or it had to be Sonny getting beat red and screaming at him. You didn't see Sonny doing that. He was obviously pissed, but you saw his teammate be like, that can't happen. We can't be a team that has championship aspirations and you do stuff like that after making the play that was there. Great job on the play. Don't ruin it. There's no reason. And so to me, it was like, all right, that happens. You see the respect, you see the earned accomplishment and leadership, and then you see a reaction by the rest of the defense. They go on to score that drive, but the defense continued to coalesce and play really well. And so that was a really huge thing that I saw. I'm glad I caught that on the broadcast, because there's so many ways in that where that can go wrong, where the guy isn't open to hear. It's so much adrenaline. He's not open to being talked to by another teammate in that moment. So then he goes down into his own hole, or he reacts and pushes the guy, and it's a scuffle. And I've seen stupid stuff like that, but you can see he's like, man, I know, I screwed up, and hey, next play. And so I think they sat him, and he had time to think about it, kind of really, take that in. But ultimately, that's a team that's led by experience and earned leadership, and that's a really positive sign.
Well, and at the end of the day, TCU is going to need Max Carroll. He's an incredibly talented player. He's somebody that is just super athletic, and he's a smart player that made a really stupid decision in a moment. So I love what you talked about, how he responded. It wasn't just the leadership that Caleb showed. It was the maturity that Max showed to take that in and to understand he's got to be better for his team. That kind of segues me into kind of the perfect, the way I want to cap this off. TCU wins the Iron Skillet. They get to keep it in Fort Worth. That's great. TCU's 3-0 in the preseason, but as Sonny said in the postgame, now the real season starts. You are going to be on the call for us Friday night at Arizona State. As you look ahead, not just to this particular game on the short week, Arizona State's got an even shorter week, which is good, and they have to travel as well back home. What do you see kind of Friday night, what we can expect? They've got a good quarterback and a great wide receiver and Levitt and Tyson. It's going to be a challenge, obviously, in that environment. But TCU in the hierarchy of the Big 12 is where, in your opinion, and how good can this team be going forward?
Yeah, I think a preseason, they were kind of in that 1B tier where, there's a little bit to prove, but a lot of returning experience and talent. And you see things start to shake out. Listen, this is kind of one of those that, have you seen that electric little jockey horse race from back in the day?
Yeah.
Literally one after the other gaining leads. This is the Big 12 that we've become accustomed to. But TCU's right there. And again, having a veteran quarterback, we saw the preseason list of all the quarterbacks in the Big 12 and so much experience, so much talent. But you see the squads that are built around them as well. So Arizona State and Sam Levitt are one of the elite ones. We saw Devin Dampier. We were like, all right, well, if that can look like. Maybe still kind of a tier below, but very talented still in Utah. BYU, we'll see how Bear kind of develops into a quarterback. He's got an insane amount of talent, a crazy QB number, throwback in all the ways. So we'll see how they develop. Tech is looking like a wagon. We'll see Baron Morton's injury, what that looks like. They've got a capable backup quarterback down there and lots of talent in the trenches. And then Baylor as well. Baylor's coming up, already a rivalry in itself with Sawyer Robinson. Even after the loss, they'll be in contention, and Rocco Beckton. I mean, you could go down the list. And so TCU, after starting 1B without games being played, is now, to me, in the top tier of contenders, just based on a quarterback and based on what looks like a complete team, a team that has a lot of experience, senior leadership at every position, and a team that sneakily won a lot of games last year. Not everyone can say that. And so they went to a bowl game. They got the extra practice. They got momentum into this year. People talk about the ethereal momentum, but there's a real thing to having, putting steps and steps and steps of building from off season to camp and camaraderie and all that stuff into a team. And TCU looks to be right there at the top. And we knew this was going to be a gauntlet, starting with, SMU, Arizona State right after. And so we'll see how they respond. Again, another away game, hostile environment. I know it gets loud there in Tempe. I'll be there calling the game. And, an elite quarterback receiving duo, but I think a very talented team that'll test TCU all over the board.
As you jump into film study before your call on Friday night, what's one area you're really going to be watching that TCU has an advantage in, or that you think Arizona State's really going to pressure them with?
I think Arizona State's going to put a lot of pressure on this offensive line unit. We talked about, I think they're growing, that there's a lot of things to improve on. They played pretty admirably to be able to put up the numbers that Josh Hoover did and their ground game did. But I don't think they've seen a ton of pressure consistently from a group that kind of really sets their hair on fire. So I think Arizona State, they're going to have the crowd behind them. There's going to be noise, so there's going to be, the working in the noise on offense and the communication. And then you're going to see what this offensive line, how they respond to maybe not great, looks, weird things happening. Like, how do you communicate? How do you get on the same page from tackle to tackle and Colton Deary out? And I think that'll be, obviously I focus on the line, but like that, to me, if the line takes a step, the sky's the limit for his offense. We're talking, playoff contention. We're there almost, but the line will be the reason that they kind of take things over in this Big 12, and we see them in Arlington or not. And so to me, Arizona State understands that. Kenny Dillingham's done a great job building a program kind of really from the depth. From literal sanctions and fines and all that stuff. And they've got a lot of Texas kids. They've got TCU former ties from personnel, player development guys, recruiting guys. And so there's a kind of an underlying heated nature to this game coming in there. And both teams, Arizona State's already got one loss. And so there's a lot of urgency on their side to really not get a second loss in the hole on their resume. So huge game. Hope the Frogs travel. A lot of fun in Tempe. And I think a new setting. I don't think we've played there. Yeah. Maybe a bowl game back in the day or something. So just a new setting. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm going to be out there in Tempe as well. And I do think I'm trying to Google this really quickly on the fly. Trying to think of how many times TCU's 0-1. They've played there one time. It has been since 1975. That predates both of us, Marshall. So we're making history Friday night. Also super excited to have you on the call, as we know that's always a fun one. Marshall, other than TC Radio, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, I do a Just Win podcast, a Raiders focus podcast with Ted Wynn of The Athletic. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We also are on YouTube. We stream Sundays after the Raiders play, and then we also have a recorded show on Wednesdays previewing that week's matchups. And then on the weekends, roughly every other Friday, I record kind of the Big 12 wrap-up on TuneIn Radio. You can find that for free on tunein.com. And then hopefully you'll hear me on the Hoover Frogs Sports Network next to Brian Estrich starting this Friday in Tempe with the Frogs.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you call on this one. Marshall, always appreciate your time, your insight, and everything that you represent for TCU, both on and off the field as a player and now as one of the voices of this university and one of just the great people that's ever put on purple. And that's the most important thing. Thanks so much for your time, Marshall.
Thank you, Mo.